This video we're looking at graphing linear functions. In this case we have a linear equation. First thing we want to do is solve for y. Now when we graph here we want to keep in mind our graphing policy. We're looking at labeling the x and y axis. Label the x equals 0 line, the y equals 0 line. We're going to use a ruler to connect all of our points so we have a nice straight linear line. And we're going to label both the x and y intercepts on the graph. To start, I like to figure out first what is my equation in slope-intercept form. So first thing we need to do is solve for y. So we're going to subtract 3x to both sides. That leaves me with negative 3x plus 2. And there's a reason why I put the negative 3x first. You'll see that in a second. The next thing we need to do is to get rid of the negative 2. I'm going to divide everything by negative 2. And when we do that, the negative 2's are going to reduce down to a positive 1, or just y. Now, a negative divided by a negative is going to turn into a positive, so my slope is going to be 3 over 1. I like to write the x value right next to it, and then we have positive 2 divided by negative 2. That turns into a negative 1. Now what we just did was we solved this equation for y. And what we can do now is identify each piece of the equation. My slope is 3 over 1. My y-intercept, which is the starting point of our graph, otherwise known as the b value, is negative 1. Sorry for that. Here's what we have now. We've got the slope and the y-intercept. On our graph, when we start to graph, well, first thing we need to do is label the x and the y-axis. The x-axis is the horizontal line that goes from left to right. Now this, we're going to also label as our y equals 0 line. I usually put that in parentheses here. The next thing we need to do is label our y-axis. That is the vertical line going straight up and down. That is the equation x equals 0. And the two spots where the x and y-axis meet is called the origin at the point 0, 0. From that origin, we're going to go ahead and move up, down one value. That is our y-intercept. So there's our first point of our graph. The second point is going to come from using the slope. Slope is rise over run. So from that y-intercept, we're going to move up. 1, 2, 3. That's positive, so we're going to move to the right. 1, 2. And we're going to follow that pattern for as long as our graph continues. Go up 1, 2, 3, over 1, 2 to the right. Up 1, 2, 3, 1, 2 to the right. 1, 2, 3, 2 to the right. And we're going to go down 1, 2, 3, over 1, 2 to get some points in the other direction. You can follow that pattern for the rest of the graph. Now, I'm going to cheat a little bit, and hopefully this will work. I need to make a straight line connecting all of my ordered pairs. To do that, you should use a ruler. I'm going to use my graphing technology. And I should also put arrows on each part of this line. That'll probably be the best thing so we can represent this is ongoing. Let's see if I can do that quickly. There we go. Should have arrows on each spot. Alright, now we've got a nice line. This is the equation y equals 3/2 x minus 1. We labeled our x and y-axis. We labeled the zeros, x equals 0 line, y equals 0 line. We use a ruler. We next need to find and label the x-intercept and y-intercept. I like to start with the y-intercept. The y-intercept is where it crosses this y-axis. That was actually the very first point that we have. This location is at the spot go over 0. And what did we do? We went down 1. quick way to determine the y-intercept is right here. That's our b value. Now, for the x-intercept, we have to do a little more work. If you remember from the example that we looked at just previous here, we have to figure out the x-intercept, and that is when y equals 0. So I'm going to take my equation, and I'm going to put 0 in for y. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to solve the expression for x. To do that, I need to add 1 to both sides. And I get 3/2 x equals 1. And now we have to get x by itself. 3/2 times x. To get rid of the fraction, we're not going to divide by the fraction. We're going to multiply by the reciprocal, both sides. So I'm going to multiply by 2/3 to each side. That's one of the worst looking 3's you'll ever see. This is 2/3 times 1, which is just 2/3. And then the 3/2 and the 2 are going to reduce down to just 1 or x. So my x-intercept is now at this location right here where it crosses the x-axis. There, and that is at the ordered pair. X is 2/3. And our y value is 0. And that is how you graph a linear function following the graphing policy, labeling x-intercept, y-intercept, and writing the graph. The last thing I guess I would recommend is you just created a nice, pretty graph. Let's give this equation a pretty name. So this line is y equals 3/2 x minus 1.